All right, so we're gonna do this one, huh?
Yeah, a little bit different. Here's a cover of Stephen King's Cujo novel. I know that you've got a great story on this one.
It kind of just goes back to creativity, and it's something you and I talked about in the past, where if you're constantly creating, at some point you got to consume, you got to replenish that tank, and I think you see that with bands a lot in music, where someone went through some horrible times in life and relationship drama, and they go and write one or two great albums based on this person or circumstances that happened to them, and they had all this content, and then the third album kind of flops because they got no more life experiences to write about. And what I feel like when I was working on writing my books, when I'm doing something creative, when I'm trying to create music, if you're constantly in output mode and you're not getting inspiration from other places, other things, other experiences, the tank kind of runs dry. And I'm sure you felt that way at some point doing creative work at Daggerford.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I was working on a book, and I know Stephen King's, and that's certainly nowhere near like my favorite author, but I always appreciated his output.
Mhm.
And he's got a book called On Writing or something. It's about writing. So I picked it up just to, seeking a little bit of inspiration. And that led me to YouTube. And I'm like, oh, I want to see if I can see him speak about some topics, right? So he goes into this quick story. Now I'm ad libbing here. I listened to the story once. I'm probably gonna make some shit up because I don't know the whole story verbatim, but he's telling the story about he bought a motorcycle or something, moped, motorcycle, I don't know, and it wasn't running good. And his friend's like, "Oh, you need to go way down the other side of town, go up on this hill. There's a guy up there in a barn. He'll fix that for you." So King's like, "All right," heads down there. Halfway there, his motorcycle starts to break down. Somehow he barely gets there, goes up the hill. He's right outside the barn. He's like, "Ah, I made it." This big ass like Doberman or something comes out, just barking and foaming at the mouth, and he's like, "Oh shit!" So,
Yeah.
and then he's expecting the owner to come out and like wrangle this dog back and save him from getting his ass chewed up. You know, owner comes out of the barn. He thinks everything's gonna be okay. Next thing you know, the dog lunges at Stephen, and this is when the owner decides to take a big like pipe wrench or something, and he cracks the dog with it. And King's like, "Oh, whew, I'm not going to get devoured by this rabid dog right now."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm expecting the owner to say, 'Hey, sorry, my dog was aggressive or came after you.'" And then instead of that, the owner goes, "He must not have liked your face." So Stephen King's like, "Okay, all right." Um, and so
Unexpected.
unexpected, right? Because the guy's like kind of screw off. In long story short, the moped gets fixed or the motorcycle gets fixed, and he rides it home, and then he goes and writes Cujo. So it's one of those things that if he never left his house that day to have this experience, we don't have this book or this movie right now, and it's all
Right.
because he had this intense moment with a dog. And that is the tiny little spark it took to set this whole thing off. And I talk a lot about when I'm mentoring people about creating things, or, being a cleverness, coming up with ideas. You kind of have to live life, right? How was COVID for the last 18 months of just being locked up in your house? Did you feel ultra creative?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And you kind of miss that walk through the city to go to work, or that drive to work where you hear sounds in the street to give you ideas. You see a billboard, you heard conversations, you You saw how someone was dressed and you thought that was cool. And you soak up this environment, right? And it sparks ideas. You have experiences. You have good experiences and bad experiences, and those all go back to idea generation.
Mm-hmm.
Because you start thinking about this stuff, and most of the great creatives have something to pull from. Cujo is that point of it's just a short interaction with a giant, angry, foaming at the mouth dog that was about to treat you like a two-piece snack. That's all it took to write a whole novel, right? And I feel at times we're sitting at home where you want to work from home now. So we sleep at home 8 hours and now we work 8 hours. Well, there's 16 hours of your day that you're sitting in the house. Well, shit, now people will deliver my groceries. I don't even need to go to the goddamn store anymore.
Yeah, right.
And if you're like most people today, you don't even want to cook. So I'm just going to Uber that shit and I'm going to get Uber Eats to bring my dinner to me. So now I'm at home 18 hours a day, and then, COVID, no one could go to the gym, so they bought all the gym equipment. So now they're working out at home. You don't leave the goddamn house anymore.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So where are you going to replenish? Now, you can do it through reading. I'm sure watching some TV, you can get ideas, but I'm not sure we have Cujo if Stephen King watched a movie about a crazy dog, right? Or a YouTube video. It might have sparked an idea. But if you've ever stood in front of somebody, story for another day, but I've had guns pointed at my face. Not a good feeling. It's not the same when you see a gun pointing at you on TV. Like when you're staring down the barrel, it's like it's a different fucking vibe, right? When you're standing in front of this like giant dog that you know is about to rip your throat out, that emotion you feel is a significantly different than what you get from reading a book or watching a movie or watching a YouTube video. It took that in-person experience, right, to really set that idea off. But we're at a point where we're not leaving the house anymore. So, okay, and I'm sure you traveled a lot. You lived and traveled all around the world. I'm sure some of your great ideas came from walking through an airport.
I struggle to say that any of my ideas are great, but I've definitely had ideas going through airports for sure.
Yeah, because every time you travel, you come back with a good idea. So that's bullshit.
Yeah.
But
yeah. No, but I agree. Like the idea that you've got to almost like the brain works in wonderful ways, and you've got to almost switch it off sometimes and just kind of experience what's around you in order for you to. I even think of like some of the even business things, say even tactical small things that we've talked about over the last few years that have come from that space where you can't be in production mode. You've got to almost give yourself a minute just to breathe. And that's where the ideas come from.
It's that thought of, and I tell, people coming out of college the same thought, we're reoccurring theme on this channel is going to be, hard work and logging a lot of hours and whatnot. But if you're doing your job 40 hours a week and you're consumed by the work, you don't have a lot of time to think and to get creative and come up with these ideas. It's any great athlete, right? The night they go to before the big race, they go to bed thinking about the big race, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's that downtime because you're not thinking about nothing when you're racing. It's that night before when you're going through the motions in your head. You're thinking about what could go right and what could go wrong. You envision yourself running through that finish line. In the same way, you want to come up with ideas and solve problems. It's hard when you're in the mix of work all day. You're in meetings 2 hours a day. You can't just zone out and start thinking about random shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be done off hours because trying to do that in production time just doesn't work. And that's where I think that whole I'll leave work at the office and then people check out, they work till 5, but they mentally check out at 4. And then they don't think about nothing until the next morning at 8:00. And it's like, well, you're never going to show up to work with that next idea or solve that problem if you're not going out and kind of experiencing stuff, soaking up the environment and spending a little bit of time outside of work, right? Trying to come up with an idea.
But I'll layer on top of that too, James, that it's not just that you've got to spend time outside of work to get the inspiration. What do you think of the idea that you've almost got to be thoughtful about what you've got to think, you've got to almost you've got to shock yourself into thinking or seeing something that you've never seen before. I've always found that inspiration typically comes to me when I'm listening to something that I've never heard before, or I'm watching something that I've never heard before. I'm looking at something I've never heard before. I think it speaks to Stephen King's experience with Cujo. The unexpectedness of it typically will inspire a bit of inspiration.
I mean, anytime you're surprised, it creates, I think, this adrenaline and this emotion that you just weren't expecting. So I think those are going to have a lasting impression on you. It's highly probable that that's going to be the first thing that comes to mind when you're trying to get in that creative mode. But I think things as simple as when I used to drive to the office, I've taken every way possible. I wanted to see different homes and there's different cars and different people and different billboards and different everything. Like this downtown area and this is a more rural area. It's just, I always wanted to try to just take a different path to see something different. And, working in the city, saying, well, I'm going to go this block. And then the next week, I'm going to take this block. And then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to take the long route. I'm going to take the long way home.
Yeah.
Just try to get some new experience or see something I never saw before. Oh, shit, I didn't know that was there. Or that's a really cool sign. And what that makes me do is go Google shit, right?
Yeah.
What this really does, it requires you to consume again, right? It's with your eyes and ears, you're kind of replenishing these, different colors and different styles and different words you hear people say in conversation, all that stuff, right? And you're replenishing that bank of things to pull from. You just can't, back to my music reference, you had a couple shitty relationships and then you went on to write records about them, like some of the best records ever was dealing with alcohol, drugs, and like women that broke hearts. So,
right.
Like, well, what do you want to do if you want to write the next best album? It's like, go get your heart broken again. So,
yeah.
But you have to go live because it's really, or you just got to be super creative all the time. And let's face it, people just can't do that. They just can't create shit on the fly, inspiration on demand, nonstop, and pump out 10 albums. It's usually rooted in something. I'm not saying you can't do it, but if you are constantly replenishing and you have things to pull from, it's just a tad bit easier. And I think people that travel a lot never seem to have that problem. I was in New York once when a terrorist attack happened. That's just an experience. Who's got that experience other than the people that lived in New York, right?
Yeah, right.
There's all these things that happen when you travel. You meet new people, you hear different languages, different ideas, different views, different ways of dress. You get exposed to new music, new food, all this stuff that, sparks creativity or just takes your mind on a different pathway other than I slept in my house for 8 hours. I worked from home in 8 hours staring at the same screen. I just had my Chipotle grill dropped off from Uber Eats and I'm going to binge some Netflix. And maybe you can replenish that store of creativity by doing that. But I just don't know if that interaction with the DoorDash guy dropping off my burrito is going to be. So,
yeah. Cujo, the DoorDash delivery guy.
No doubt. Like, I got a friend in the music industry, and his level of creativity is a top-notch producer in the game, but his ear is listening for shit everywhere he goes. Like, this dude was getting like an MRI one day, and there was some kind of clicking sound beat going on. Dude, he sampled that shit and turned it into a song, into a beat somehow. But it's again, like, he's got that mindset that everywhere he goes, he's seeking inspiration and he's seeking creativity. And this is what makes him one of the best people in the game. Because if he just sat at home, he doesn't have that. I guess we could have that, but it's going to come from listening to other people's shit, which is going to make his stuff sound like everybody else's stuff.
Right.
just
Or it's
living.
like he's seeing and listening to the same thing all the time, being stuck at home, for example.
And the next thing you know, it's like, well, that third album sounds like the first two albums.
There you go. Yeah. Right.
And then there's no progress, and that's like music evolves, you don't, and then you get left behind, right? So,
Yeah. Right.
granted, there's some classic types of music that never go out of style, but if you're trying to be a forward-thinking producer, sampling an MRI machine is kind of a cool way to go. But if you're walking around the world with your eyes wide open, it's easy to see all that stuff. But what do we do today? We half the people that walk around talking on a cell phone.
Yeah.
And they're not even soaking up the environment. And I used to love driving to work. I would put some music on. Occasionally I would put a podcast on. Sometimes I just had no music, roll the windows down, just soak it all in.
Mm-hmm.
Every day it's like charging a battery. That was like, if my creative battery's at 0 because I just wrote 15,000 words in a book and I'm working on some marketing for one of our companies and I'm depleted. Every day that was like a 2% charge. And then in the course of the week, my battery's up to like 10%. And I just have to keep consuming. I need to travel. I need to go do this. I need to go to experience this. And at some point, I like creative bank is back and I got 100%. I'm curious to see where the world's going to go if we're going to work from home and have our food delivered and everything's kind of just done for us. And occasionally we travel. And then shit, Kane, by then they'll probably have some VR goggles. It's like, I'm going to Bali today from your IKEA couch. Yeah, I don't
know. So I guess the most important question of this conversation is the book Cujo or the movie Cujo any good?
So I've not read the book. I've seen the movie. And here's the funny part is I was, who knows how old when it was 81. So I was probably like, I don't know. Really, I was a toddler when I saw this shit. What's funny is where I grew up, there was no, you can't watch that. Like I was watching this shit way before 10 years old. Like I was probably 8 years old when I saw Cujo. Shit, maybe even younger than that. I just remember watching shit that I go now and I'm like, holy crap. I was watching that when I was watching Eddie Murphy Raw when I was like 10 and like Richard Pryor stand-ups and shit.
Yeah.
And yeah, my parents weren't around much, just so you know, but I've not seen it since I was probably a kid, but I remember it being good. But the fact that, I wonder, does it show you how long this book is? Doesn't matter. But I just heard that story and I'm like, man, sometimes it's just the little spark that sets that whole thing ablaze.
Yeah.
And that makes me want to go out and live life more so I can do more cool shit like this.
Absolutely. It's a great lesson.
But that's all I got for this one, man.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, I catch you.